Well, I'm glad you are all here. I've put some stories on the tables, but much like a teacher, you hesitate to put those on the table because you don't want everybody reading ahead. You don't have to worry about that yet, but we'll get there soon, I promise. Tonight, again, we're walking through the 7 last words of Christ from the cross, and this is a study that I'm kind of bouncing off of, and it's been really good to prepare for. Tonight, we're thinking about this idea of Jesus telling one of the criminals to his side, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." So, but in the coming weeks, slide 2, we're going to be looking at the conversation between one of the disciples and his mother. And then the 13th, we're going to cover 2 phrases. My God, why have you forsaken me? And also, I thirst. And then finally, we will finish up with, it is finished, and Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. So that's kind of where we're headed over the next couple of weeks. So as we kind of begin, I want to just read the story from Luke 23. And we're looking at, this is verse 32, but also then 39 through 43. So hear these words and remember this story. 2 others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." So the first thing I want us to do around the tables, it's group work, is I want you to think about what your idea of the ideal image of paradise might look like. And then I'm going to give you all just 2 or 3 minutes to share around the table, and I'm going to want one person from each table to report on the combined image. It can be a compilation, or you all can acquiesce to the most strong-willed person around the table and say, "All right, we'll go with what you say, George," right? Not that would be true, right? So, does everyone understand the assignment? The first thing what I want you to do is think about an image of paradise. What does paradise look like around your table? You have 3 minutes. Ready? Go. All right, describe your images of paradise, if you would, from around the table. And wait for George to come around with the microphone so that folks who might be on Zoom. Let's start with this table back here. Spokesperson is...
Jim.
Oh, Jim.
I think, I won't say consensus, but the majority said the beach.
Okay.
Is a good idea of
Yes.
what paradise would be. And a little more specific, the Gulf Coast.
Gulf Coast. Yes.
Some like the shells, some like the sand.
Yep.
So, but also the discussion was, will we recognize each other? Does that really matter? Just the fact that we'd be there.
Right.
And it'll be what it'll be. And we know it'll be better than what we have here.
It's a good word. All right. Next. Becky.
We couldn't decide on a physical look.
Yeah.
We said we felt it would be a place full of love, comfort, security, total peace, pain-free, and in the presence of God.
That's good. That's good. That group did good, deep work. I was thinking Clemson football. All right, who's Ben?
Here's my thought. The most euphoric moment I've ever had, like when you're on top of the mountain, everything is wonderful. You think it couldn't get any better than that, but it is going to be better than your most euphoric moment you've ever had.
That's a good word.
Next time we'll go first. Because we wrote down heaven, the ocean, worship, being in God's presence, peace and tranquility, and health.
I think that is a really good, that's a chorus of truth, right? That's a really good perspective. Because paradise is situational, but it's also transcendent. Paradise has a sliver of truth and a sliver of particularity in everybody's life. And that sense of euphoria is gained differently, isn't it, Ben? I mean, what might cause euphoria in Ben's life might not cause euphoria in mine. But the sense of euphoria still exists for other external factors. And I love the fact that Jim and Becky's table didn't draw physical images, but talked about emotive things, right? These ideas of emotion and connective thought. And the truth is, paradise, we don't fully understand, to Jim's point. We can't grasp it out of the sense that if we could imagine the best, it's probably going to be ratcheted up even more, right? The best description we might be able to come up with, I can't imagine that God doesn't have something even more extravagant in mind. And so that's what makes it so appealing. That's what makes it worth this work and the toil that we will have. And so as we think about this story, I just want to talk through it a little bit. And so in slide 5, we're just going to talk a little bit about the action and the scene. And remind ourselves about the life of Christ. One of the best ways to learn about Jesus was by the company that he kept. Right? Think about that for a minute. The ways he served and ate and lived life with those who were sinners in society is poignant. It's important information. Not only that, but it pushed the buttons of the folks who were in charge at the time. Right? He's kind of breaking social rules in a way. And it's demonstrated in a lot of stories. Luke 15 talks about the Pharisees grumbling because he's welcoming sinners and eating with them. But I know in many cases I can understand the ways in which that made them nervous. As someone who is a part of management, for lack of a better phrase, I always, when somebody asks me on a plane if I don't want to talk the entire flight, they say, "What do you do for a living?" I always say, "I'm in sales," and that's really not a lie, because I am selling Jesus as much as I can. But if I don't want to talk about it, because you never know what you're going to get if you say, "Well, I'm a pastor." And they're like, "Let me tell you about my uncle." Or, "Can I confess this thing?" And I just want to watch the movie on the way to Dallas. Anyway, I chased it. But as a part of management, and being a part of the in crowd or the Christian crowd, or being a pastor, a preacher, a Pharisee, and being a part of the power structure, people who are undermining it make people with power nervous, do they not? And so it had to have unnerved them. In fact, let's just think about, we won't think about our own pastor, but let's think about a prominent pastor in Atlanta who he or she shall remain nameless. We're not going to pick on anybody, but let's just imagine that a prominent pastor in this big city starts hanging out in the wrong side of town, at the wrong kind of establishment, but their goal is witnessing. Their goal is serving. But they're at the Gold Club one too many weekends. I don't even know if the Gold Club still exists. Is it closed? Is it closed? Dadgummit. All right, so you can tell I don't hang out there. But you understand what I mean. How quickly would that become a part of the Baptist grapevine? Or the church chatter about the fact, can you believe that that person is hanging out with that kind of crowd? When Jesus was around non-religious people, they didn't feel small. When Jesus was around non-religious people, they felt seen. And they wanted to know more. And part of this call, I think, is it's what we're called to be. Think about the story of Zacchaeus. Walking through the town, Zacchaeus is up in a tree. Who is Zacchaeus? What's he do? Tax collector. Is he beloved? He's not beloved, is he? He's hated. Why? What was the normal assumption about tax collectors in that day? They were on the take, right? It was, you take $10, you put 2 of them in your pocket, and you turn the rest in, right? They were on the take. They were scamming people, and Jesus not only meets them, but does what? Says, we're going to go to your house and eat. And he invites himself to Zacchaeus' house for supper, which in that day, hospitality was one of those things that meant a ton, right? Let's meet at Taqueria is not the same as hosting someone in your home. Even today, even if I were to say, hey, why don't y'all come to dinner? In fact, we had Brendan and Megan and Andrew to dinner in Cartersville on Sunday night. But that was just dinner. That was just fun. That was just Andrew wrestling with 3 dogs and eating baked ziti. But in that day, it was different. It was this sense that you were on a level playing field, that you saw each other as equals, that you were breaking bread, that you were sharing life with them. It was a big deal. And all the religious people are outside wagging their fingers at all of it. And then Jesus says in Luke 19, the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. Not to hang out with everybody who's got it, but to seek and save those who need, right? Who need. Luke describes this scene, the 2 hanging to Jesus' right and left, as people who do really bad things. These are criminals. These are troublemakers. These are folks who on the 11 Alive news at 6 have their mugshot up, okay? These are folks who are making the evening news. They used violence to commit their crimes. These were not white-collar criminals. These are people who I don't know if you saw the news about another shooting at the racetrack near Georgia State, and they decided just to close the racetrack because they can't do anything about it. These are folks who are using guns instead of talking it out at the racetrack near Georgia State. These are not nice people, okay? And so it's fitting that even in Jesus' last moment, with his last breaths, he is literally bound between the image of who he hung out with at all times. It's a fitting scene. It wouldn't make sense for it to be any different. And you've got this image of Jesus offering this man who Jesus dying with them, knowing everything about him, as folks who do really bad things, troublemakers, mugshot, hitting the local news, offering him paradise. Now, with Jesus, some of his last breath, he's offering paradise to a hardened criminal. And that's really important here. Now, paradise, we've already thought about what paradise can look like around our tables. No one said gathering at the Paw in Memorial Stadium after a Clemson win, but I liken that to paradise. But in paradise was a Persian word, doing word study. It's taken directly from that language. And it's this image of a king's walled garden. It's lavish. It's got orchids. It's quiet. It's got running water. I mean, think about those of you who went to Gibbs with us last year. Gibbs on steroids, Gibbs on its best day. I've not been to the Atlanta Botanical. I'm sure it's beautiful, and there are probably spots in there that are amazing. But this description of paradise is this king's garden. And it's a place of serenity. And when people really showed favor, when the king wanted to lift someone up or to say thank you, there was an invitation for them to walk with him in the garden. It's this sense of belonging. It's the sense of peace. It's literally getting away. Calgon, take me away, in a physical place. So you've got that image of paradise. And that's kind of the image that Luke is tapping here. And it also harkens back to something that's important to us. What do you think that is? One of the first stories. The Garden of Eden, right? I mean, this was the king's garden. It was God's garden. And it was tranquil. It was peaceful. It was a place of serenity until it wasn't. And what happened when it wasn't? Were we allowed back in? We were not. In fact, isn't there a description of who trolls the gate? An angel with a sword, back and forth, no one shall pass. We're not getting back in because of the fall and because of the ways in which we messed up. But then in this, not only in this story in Luke, but also especially in the Gospel of John, you've got the descriptions, which I think is beautiful, because we lost the memory of being in this place where God walked in the cool of the evening, the Garden of Eden. You've got Jesus praying before he's handed over where? The Garden of Gethsemane. You've got Jesus being crucified in that place where there was a garden. He's buried in a garden tomb. It's this imagery that John is using to tell a story about reconnection. In fact, when Mary Magdalene sees Jesus after he's raised, who does she mistake him for? A gardener. That's not just oops, right? That is solid imagery, folks. That is John telling a story of Jesus' act on the cross unlocking paradise. And not only for this person who would have made the news, but also for the world. Because the first person who was ever invited personally by the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is a hardened criminal. And if Jesus invited this person, what does that say about us? But it doesn't stop with that invitation. I mean, we're always thinking about how do we live this out. And I think Jesus is also calling us to love like he loved. And so, we're going to think, I want you to talk around the tables around the following questions. I'm going to hold them up. And we'll think a little bit about these once y'all have a time to answer them around the table for a minute. But think about, especially toward the end, about offering welcome to those, offering an opportunity for paradise for those who might not look and feel safe to be around. So I'm going to give us maybe 5 or so minutes around the table. Just read the questions. I'm sorry I didn't print them off for the table, but if you can see them, read through those and just talk around your table about these questions, if you will. And I'll call us back together very soon. Let's come back together. You might not have had a chance to answer all these questions. Some of them there are a lot of questions. Some of them are pretty deep. So why do we think Jesus associated with sinners? Compassion. Okay. He had compassion on that group.
Oh.
Okay. If you can't make it there, I'll try to repeat, George. I'm sorry? The sick need a physician, right? So compassion, but also as a change agent in their life, right? Ben? Say that again, I'm sorry. Okay, because he had a burden for it. He had a call. Okay.
And we said when the priests and the scribes didn't, it was because they were afraid to, I think.
They were afraid.
Possibly.
Some of it was fear. I think some of it was staying in, keeping the ability to have rights, not their own group, but also not becoming unclean. You know, part of it was their job. Yeah, Jackson.
Because the message of Christ is not tribal. It's universal. Right. So you can't just cut like a certain group of people out and like, you know, if you look at like Judaism today, especially like Judaism's for the Jews, it's not for anybody else. Right? That's not the message of Christ. The message of Christ is for everybody. Right. So it's it necessarily insists that he would witness to, you know, obviously the Jews first in that context, but to everyone.
That's a good word.
Well, we also said that the priests and the scribes were very concerned about purity.
Right. Purity, they didn't want to fall out, to become unclean, because then their time comes up to do duty. They can't do it. Right. All right. So what about, what turned the thief into a believer? He confesses kind of, in a way, this guy's done nothing wrong. We're the problem. So it's this confession. So how might the crowd's taunts have supplied him with the information he needed? That's a hard question, isn't it?
Could he have been in some of the crowd that had heard Jesus speak and talk?
He very well could have. I mean, who knows if he, I'm sure that with the amount of people that were following Jesus around, seeing the miracles he was doing, watching, that word was out, right? And so, in a lot of ways, they could have been a part of a crowd at some point, John. We just don't know. Based on Jesus' words, quote, "Today you will be with me in paradise," what can we guess about what happens when we die? Right? It's going to be an immediate event. All that time I spent in middle school car line thinking, if there's a purgatory, I am going to have done my time. This is proof there is none. Right? This is happening. All right. Yes. Absent from the body, present from the Lord. Absolutely. So, what groups today do we think we might be able to equate with sinners and tax collectors?
Politicians.
Politicians. Oh my goodness. You got to be careful, because I used to be a politician in Rome. Used to be is that's a good descriptor, isn't it? So to the next question, if we were, how would our family and friends react if we were to start a mission, or if we were to start serving some of the least of these, right? That list.
They'd probably think we were crazy.
Maybe. And depending on the part of town they're going to, we might get calls and say, what are you doing in that part of town? You need to stay out of there. Right? How would it differ if we were to start a ministry with hospital patients?
It's safe.
That'd be fine. That's safe, right? That's safe. And so, much like it, but in a separate image, what's the difference then in how people who do not know Christ and how comfortable they might feel in our midst? Okay? Talk more about that, Debbie. What do you mean by how we approach them?
Not being judgmental.
Okay.
Right up front. Not having one of those, if you don't follow this, you're just going to hell.
Turn or burn.
No,
Right.
that's right.
Right. Okay. So not being judgmental. Are there things that I want us to think about this as we're going to do one other exercise, then we're going to close up. But I want you to think about this week. And that is, what could you do that might welcome or make room for non-religious people in our midst? What's one thing you could do that might make room for folks who might not have ever felt comfortable in a church like this to be here? What's one thing? How might we reflect today? You have the opportunity to find paradise. And I don't want you to mishear me say that the only way you can find paradise is in the fellowship hall of Second-Ponce, because that's not what I'm saying. But how will they unless we have connection and we meet them and we serve alongside them or serve them in their midst. The last thing we're going to do, just some reminders, key insights to remember this week. Even as Jesus suffers, he offers salvation to a criminal. And if it was a hardened criminal, then why not us? The second thing to remember is, unlike the priests and scribes, Jesus associated with the ne'er-do-wells, with the sinners. And that Jesus' act welcomed all back to paradise. He made a way with all that garden imagery from John back to paradise. And in an instant. And so as we finish our time together, you've got a story on your table. And I tried to find 2 or 3 different stories of I'm calling them Good Samaritans, but these are just modern day stories of groups who might not just say, hey, let's meet at the movies or let's hang out this weekend, but having connection. So what I want you to do is one person just read the story or give the highlight of the story, and then I want you to talk around what makes this connection important and meaningful in the lives of the people they're serving. And then we're going to tell each one of these stories briefly before we close. So, couple minutes, ready, go. What's the gist of y'all's story, Jim? And maybe where was the connect and the meaning and service in it?
The gist is a group of French Muslims protected the cathedral, the Christian cathedral in town from other groups. And I drew the parallel to when there was a lot of unrest in Atlanta and gangs throwing damaging buildings up and down Peachtree Street. A group of homeless people protected Peachtree Road United Methodist.
Really?
Because they let us sleep on their steps and don't run us off.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. I know y'all had a long story. Will you give us the gist of it, even if y'all aren't able to?
Who's doing it?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Don't let me off. Don't let me off too easy, right? So the gist of our story was that a white nationalist, white supremacist protester was protesting the taking down of the Confederate flag in South Carolina at the state capitol. Basically, was about to have a heat stroke, and a black security officer, police officer, helped him up the steps along with another security officer into the sort of cool air inside the Capitol building. We did not get to discuss parallels. It was a little bit of a longer story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the picture sort of resonated with a lot of people. And when the officer was asked why he thought that was so, he said simply, because love is powerful, basically.
Love is powerful. That's great. I know y'all have the only other different story because we had a retread.
Melissa?
Hold on, Melissa. Here comes George.
Hold your horses.
All right. So it's Israelis bringing Palestinian families to visit the ocean. And there's a quote here: I think Jewish values are to reach out to other people and have peace with our neighbors, and that's what we're striving for. We say prayers for peace many times every day, and the first peace we need is with our neighbors.
What year was that?
2019.
So the world is brimming to pull us apart, is it not? And but the question is, what gives us access to both connective love, deep love, but also paradise? And that is the cross of Christ and sharing that love. And so the question going out, which is the last slide, is What would happen if every one of us who professes Christ would reach out to those who are lost and show them love and compassion in the name of Jesus? How might the world change? Now, that's deep and hard work, and I can't imagine you're going to accomplish it by next Wednesday. But it's a challenge to think about. What's one step we're going to take? What's one way we're going to live life so that someone who has never felt comfortable in a place like this might consider it? Because of the ways in which we show love and grace. Because the mugshot hero from on the cross beside Jesus didn't deserve it. But Jesus was quick to answer, wasn't he? And how might we reflect that this week?
I think by telling them, showing them, not telling them, showing them that you care, that you actually care, that you're not trying to change them or anything like that, but that you care about them.
Absolutely. Showing deep care, showing a care that's not conditional or transactional, but that is a journey with them, right? Yes.
John, this book written by David Brooks, the New York Times journalist, Jewish background fella. My peer learning group is reading it and discussing it right now. And I mean, to boil it all down, what you were talking about tonight, but how do you reach out? How do you get to know other people? He describes it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the whole book is about. And I just hold it up. You can look at it and order whatever. It's a great book about how to get to know other people in a deeper way.
To truly see someone.
Yep.
To become an illuminator.
Yep.
Right? That's one of the books that's driving my D-Min work. Yep. And excellent. If you've not read it, there's podcasts out there where he talks about it. It's excellent work. And it is about being seen.
How
the book,
to know a person.
Yes, the book is by David Brooks, How to Know a Person. It's a New York Times. He's a New York Times writer, and it's on the one of the. You can easily find it on Amazon or other places. So, How to Know a Person. Great. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. Any other questions or comments before we depart with work to do? Yes, Debbie. Say that one more time into the mic.
One of the things you have to do at the very first is listen to somebody.
And that's reflected in his work. Being able to really listen. And that's hard, isn't it? It really is. Because we're listening to, many times, we're listening to argue, right? We're listening to create our best argument, counter argument. It's 7:02. It's time for me to go get my dog from daycare. It was good to be with you all tonight. I enjoyed it. Thank you.